Hi everybody, it's Michael and today I'm back with another of my walkthrough videos, and today I would like to show you Village, the recent Kennerspiel des Jahres winner. It's designed by Inka and Markus Brand, who are normally, I guess, more popular for children's games, although they have designed a castle for all seasons and the upcoming dice game Saint-Malo. Village is for 2 to 4 players, ages 12 and up. The playing time is 60 to 90 minutes. This version I have here is the one from Eggertspiele and Pegasus. It's German and English, but it's been picked up for distribution in the US by Tasty Minstrel Games, and I guess it's about to come out any day now. Village is in essence, I would say, an action selection game. There are some who would classify it as a worker placement game, and there's a discussion online whether this is actually the case. And I agree with those that say that it's not really a worker placement game. I mean, there are workers in the game, and but they're more a resource than a mechanism to select actions. And also, and I guess if you know anything about this game at all, you will know this, there's a very nice little detail in here that your workers can die, so as the game goes on you have less and less workers. What I would like to do now is to show you how a typical 2-player game could play out, and yeah, I hope you have fun. So, as always, let's have a brief look at the components first. In the middle we have the game board with the various areas where you can pick your actions. Up here we have the market where we set up customer demand tiles, and since this is a 2-player game we left the 3 and 4 space empty here. Then each player has a disc in their color, blue and red in this case, at the scoring track. Down here we put the next starting player marker. And then down here we have the Village Chronicle, and again, since we only play a 2-player game, there are certain spots with a 4 and a 3 on them, and we all filled them up with a unused color, in this case yellow. And over here we have the anonymous graves, and the same holds here, so basically the 3 and the 4 space were filled up. Okay, then over here we have the rest of the customer demand tiles. We have coins, we have the different goods, scrolls, plows, oxen, horses and wagons. We have bags of grain, and here we have the influence cubes. Green is persuasiveness, pink is knowledge, orange is skill, brown is faith, and the black ones are pest or sickness cubes. Then we have 2 kinds of bags. This one is to put the influence cubes in, this one is to put the family members in that will be part of the mass in the church at the end of each round. Here we have an overview for the mass. And here we have a setup card for 2 players, and this will basically instruct us how many cubes to put in the bag each round. And then we have finally the player boards, in this case farmyards of the players. Those are basically the same, so let's take a look at the blue one. Blue will be the starting player, this is why he has this marker. Then each player has some discs and 1 coin. And they have the farmyard, and they have the starting family members on there. These are, as you can see, of the 1st generation, so these are the ones that are actually in the game. And over here in the supply we have family members of a 2nd, 3rd and 4th generation. And also we have this time track that goes around, and we put a disc on the starting space right next to the bridge. So, these are the components, and while I'm at it, let's talk about briefly when the game ends. Basically, we have the Village Chronicle and we have the anonymous graves, and if either one of them is filled, then the game is over. Okay, so those were the components, and now we can start the game. Okay, at the start of each round, we first seed the bags with cubes, and for that we look at this reference card for 2 players, and basically it says here to put 3 pink cubes in it. So let's do that.
Next are 4 brown cubes. Then 4 green cubes, and then 3 orange cubes.
Finally, the maximum of the black cubes, so basically all that there are right now. And then we shuffle them a little bit, and now we distribute them on the board. So on the reference card it says, for example, to put 1 cube in the blue area and 2 cubes in the green area. So 1 cube in the blue area, and I just draw these randomly and blind from the bag. Now the setup is done, and we can start with the player's actions. So, the blue player is the starting player, and what you do when it's your turn, you basically pick up a cube from the different areas that are there, these colored circles, and you take the cube, put it on your player board, your farmyard, and then if you want to, you can execute the action that is associated with the corresponding space. I said may because it's optional. There's one exception: a market day has always to be held. Okay, so it's a blue player's first turn, and he likes to perform a marriage action down here, so basically the purple area, and he decides to pick up a cube, and he has a choice of 3 colors, and he just picks a green one. And now what he does is he puts it here on his farmyard in his personal storage, and then he's allowed to execute the marriage action, which basically means that a family member of his will marry and they will produce offspring. So what he'll do, he take a new family member of the lowest generation. So basically the lowest generation available in the supply is a 2. So he takes one family member and just puts it on his farmyard. The red player decides that he wants to go into the crafting areas. So that's a yellow area, and he decides to pick up a brown cube. And now there are 5 different crafting buildings that he can go to. And basically he wants to go to the Wainwright to get a wagon. And here he has 2 choices. Basically, to get a wagon, he could pay a pink and an orange cube, but he doesn't have that. So the other option is to send a family member here into apprenticeship, and that's exactly what we do. So we pick up a family member from our farmyard and put him on the building. And the action of putting a family member here actually costs 2 time, as you can see by these 2 hourglasses here. So we'll advance our time marker by 2 spaces clockwise around the board. And then to produce a wagon, it actually costs another 2 time. So what we'll do is add another 2 time, and then we get a wagon from the supply. And we can put it next to our farmyard. We could also put it on our farmyard, but then it would be a little crowded, so let's just put it next. The blue player decides he wants to harvest some grain, and this is this action space here, so he takes a cube. And then we look at our farmyard. There are basically 3 different options that you can take to harvest grain. The first one is, if you have a family member on his farmyard, and he has, you can take 2 grain. If you have a family member, a plow, and a horse, you can take 3, and if you have a family member, a plow and an ox, you can take 4. He doesn't have neither animals or plows, so basically what you can do is just take 2 grain from the supply and put it down here in the storage, and you can always only store 5 grain. The red player also wants to take the marriage action, so he takes a brown cube, puts it on his board, and brings in another family member. The red player wants to send one of his families to the council chamber, and that's the red area here. So, as usual, he picks up a cube, and now he gets to pick one of his available family members to put in there. Now he has to make a choice. The ones from the first generation are likely to die until the end of the game, because they're the oldest. About the second generation, he would only die if the 4 others have died. And so basically, since the red player wants his family member to last in the council chamber, he actually decides to pick up the one with the 2. And he can put him here, but that will cost 1 time, and then either 2 green cubes or a scroll. And the blue player has 2 green cubes, so basically there was a purpose in the colors that he picked up in the previous rounds. So he pays the 2 cubes, he pays a time, and then he's allowed to take the benefit of this row that he occupies in the council chamber, basically. And this is that he'll be the next starting player. Now you might say, wait, he already is the next starting player. But okay, now he's pretty sure that he's the next starting player, because the red player can't take it from him. And also, he has started off advancing his family member's career as a senator. The red player wants to send a family member traveling, so he picks up a cube from the green, the traveling area. Then he decides to pick up a first generation family member. And basically, traveling starts here. And if you take a closer look, there are 2 paths along which you can travel from the beginning on. Both cost 2 time, and a wagon, and then either 2 brown cubes or 2 pink cubes. And the red player has picked up 2 brown cubes previously, so he pays them, puts them back in the supply. He also pays his wagon, and he pays 2 time. And then his family member can basically travel along this northern road here to the city, and will get 3 victory points for that, or 3 prestige, which we mark here on the track. And then finally, the red player will use one of his discs to mark that he has visited his city, because at the end of the game, depending on how many cities you've visited, that's extra points for you. Now, the blue player wants to place a family member in the church. That's a brown area, so he picks up a cube. And then, to throw a family member in the black bag, you either need to pay a brown cube or 3 time. And he has a brown cube from earlier, so he pays that. And then basically we have this black bag here, and he picks 1 family member from his farmyard and puts it in the black bag. And we'll see about what the black bag means later when the mass is red. The red player also wants to put a family member in the church, so he takes a cube. And then he doesn't have a brown cube, so he actually has to pay the 3 time. And he'll do that. 1, 2, 3. And then he decides to pick a 2nd generation family member, and it is put in the black bag. The blue player picks a cube from the crafting area, and he actually will decide to go into the stable and get a horse or an oxen. The thing is, he doesn't have enough grain to buy them the normal way, so he'll also put a family member of his into apprenticeship. So he puts 1 here. And basically, apprenticeship is 3 time, and then raising an oxen is another 3 time. So basically, he has to pay 6 time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But then he gets an oxen. The red player decides that if he wants to continue his travels, he needs more wagons, because each time you travel a leg, or if you travel to the next city, then the wagon is consumed. So he decides he wants to build a new wagon, so he picks up a cube from the crafting area. And then in the rain right, he already has his apprentice. So basically, he could now either pay an orange or a pink cube, or just pay the 2 time again, because he already has trained his apprentice, so for another 2 time he can get a wagon. And that's what he does. So he pays 2 time, and now his time marker has crossed the bridge, which means at the end of his turn, a family member will die. But first we pay 2 time, and we get a wagon. Okay, now, since the marker has passed the bridge, and each time that happens, one of your family members passes away, and the family member has to be of your oldest generation, and it has to be visible. So basically, the family members we put into the black bag, they can't die, at least not at this moment. And so, right here, he has 2 1s, and on the board, he has 2 1s. So basically, any of them can die, and he decides, because he still needs the others, that one of his family members who worked on the farmyard will actually die. And now we take a look at the Village Chronicle. So basically, there are 5 different sections in the Village Chronicle for family members of different jobs or vocations. This one is the council chamber, the red one. The yellow one is the crafting area. The green one is the travels. The brown one is a church, and the purple one is actually the farmyard. So basically, since he died while he was working on a farmyard, he gets to enter the city chronicle or the village chronicle as one of the greatest farmers ever known. And so there are now only 2 spots left in this category. The blue player would actually like to put another of his family members into the church, so he takes a cube from there. And now it would either cost a brown cube or 3 time, but he hasn't got a brown cube, and 3 time would mean that the marker crosses the bridge, and a family member of his would have to die, so he doesn't want that. But you can always use a coin as any cube, so it actually does that. The coin that he has from the start of the game, he will pay that as a substitute for a brown cube, meaning that he gets to put one of his first generation family members into the black bag. The red player would like to travel again, and the only cube that's left here on the green area is a black cube, and black cubes are pest. So basically the black cube goes immediately back to the supply, and the red player loses 2 time. But after that he can perform his traveling normally, and what he would like to do is to travel to this other town up here. So it will cost a wagon, 2 time, and 2 orange, and a pink cube. And he can pay all of that very nicely. He also has to pay 2 time. But then his marker can move up here, and the reward for traveling here is a coin, which he gets to place in his supply. And also we can mark the second city with a red disc. The blue player is running low on family members that don't have a job yet, so he decides to take the family or marriage action. I think it's actually called family action, and when I called it marriage before, that was wrong. So he takes the family action once more, takes the last cube from there, and gets put another second generation family member on his board. The red player decides to take the council chamber action. That's a black cube, so again two time is lost. And then he puts his last remaining family member on the first step, and he has to pay an additional time and either a scroll or 2 green cubes, and he decides to pay the 2 green cubes with 2 coins. And now he would be able to take the reward of this part of the council chamber, but that's already gone. But he now has a family member who is on the city council. The blue player would like to go crafting again, so he takes a cube. And now he would actually like to visit the blacksmith to get a plow. And this time he'll go for the route that he pays 2 cubes, an orange and a pink one, to actually get the plow without sending a family member into an apprenticeship here. The blue player looks at the market and sees that the customers available at the 3 booths where you can actually have a market either require 3 bags of grain and a horse. And nobody of the players has that at this moment. However, there's still one harvest action available, and he thinks if the blue player is able to take that harvest action, then he will actually have enough bags of grain to satisfy either customer. So what he does is actually take the market now, so that the market day will be held and no player will be able to sell anything. And then basically that's market action, and I think it will come up later again, and then I'll explain in detail how it would have worked if a player would be able to sell something. But basically the red player just takes a green cube. The blue player actually decides to not go to use the harvest action, but the crafts action instead. That's a black cube, so another 2 time lost. And then he decides to visit the windmill. In the windmill you can't place any of your family members, but you can give up 2 grain to get 2 coins. And you have to pay 2 time. So he has 2 grains, 2 bags of grain. He gives them up. He gets 2 coins from the supply, and he has to pay 2 time, which means that now his first family member will die. Now his only choice for letting somebody die is the craftsman over here and the farmer here on his board, because his other 2 ones are in the bag, and he can't let this one die because that's a 2, and you have to let die the ones first. So actually he decides to let this farmer die, and he goes into the purple section of the village chronicle. And finally the red player has to take the last action, which is the harvest, so he takes the cube, costing him 2 time, so again somebody will die, but for now he will take the harvest action, which is too bad because he actually hasn't anybody on the farmyard, and without somebody on the farmyard you can't harvest, so basically he just lost 2 time for nothing. Or maybe not nothing, because actually somebody gets to die, and his choices are basically the councilman, the traveler, or the craftsman, and he decides to let the councilman die because there's only 1 red spot available in the city chronicle, and that one's now filled. Okay, that was basically the round. So what will happen now is that the mass is being read, and for that we'll take a closer look at this reference card here. Okay, as you're allowed to examine the contents of the black bag at any time during the game, let's actually do that now. So what's in there? There's actually 4 neutral black monks, and then the blue player threw in 2 family members, and the red one threw in their 1. And what would happen during the mass is that in the second step you would draw 4 family members from the bag and put them into the church, if they are actually family members from the players. The black ones just go back in the bag once they're drawn. So basically from this 7, 4 would be drawn, and as you can see, especially for the red player, chances are pretty low that actually his family member is drawn out. So what's happening in the first phase here, 1A, is that each player in turn order can decide to spend a coin to buy one of his members out of the bag. And the blue player would be first to do that, and he actually wants to pay a coin to make sure that this family member is drawn, so this is set aside. And then it goes over to the red player, and he doesn't have any coins, so he can't buy this member out. And, well, that's it. Then now these 4 are thrown into the bag. And since we already have 1, we only pull out 3. And it's a red one and 2 black ones. So the red one is put with that one, and the blacks go back in the bag. And now we actually put them into the church. So these 2 family members that we drew out of the bag are placed into the church in the first window here. And now in the third step, or the second step, because that's 1A and B, what will happen that the players can pay grain to advance their family members in the church hierarchy. So for example, the blue player could pay 1 grain to have the member put here, and then another 2 grain to put him here, for example. But unfortunately, none of the players have any grain, so nothing happens here. And then in the third phase of reading the Mass, we would actually check which player has the most family members in the church, and he would be awarded 2 victory points. And if there's a tie, then whoever is the furthest along in the hierarchy will actually get the points. And since they both have 2 family members in here, and they are both furthest along in the hierarchy, basically what will happen is that both the red player and the blue player will get 2 points. And after reading the Mass, what will happen is that the new starting player is assigned, but the blue player is the next starting player, and he already was the current starting player, so this stays where it is, and this one goes back into the council chamber. So, to set up the next round, I will again look at the reference here. Okay, so the blue player starts by taking and harvesting action. He has a family member, and he has an ox, and he has plow, so that means that he gets 4 grain. The red player decides that because he has no available family members, he actually should take the family action. So he picks up a pink cube and puts one of his second generation members on his farmyard. The blue player decides that he would like to breed a horse, and since he already is an apprentice in the stable, that will only cost him 3 time. And first he has to take a cube, of course, and he takes a brown one. And yeah, then he pays 3 time. 1, 2, 3, and gets a horse. The red player decides to produce yet another wagon, so he takes a brown cube and loses 2 time for producing a wagon. The blue player decides that he wants to have a market day, so he takes the pink cube, puts it on his board, and then he can satisfy the demands of any of the 3 customers next to the booth up there. And he first decides to satisfy the demand of the guy who likes a horse. So he has a horse, so he can give it away. And now he has satisfied this demand, and he can put the customer face down next to his farm yard, and that will give him victory points at the end of the game. Now, the red player has to pass because he doesn't have any grain and there are no other demands from customers. Then it's back to the blue player, and now he started the market day, but only his first sale was for free. Now, like everybody else, he has to pay a green cube at a time, and he can do that, basically paying a time and a green cube, to also satisfy this customer's demand by giving up 3 grain. The red player already has passed, so it's back to the blue player, but now he also passes again because he doesn't have any grain left. And what happens now is basically that the 3 stalls are filled from this queue, and then the queue is advanced, and then new customers are flipped up from the stack we prepared at the start of the game. The red player decides to harvest. He takes the black cube, which costs him 2 time. And then he has a family member, but no animals or plows, so he actually gets 2 grain. The blue player goes crafting, so he takes a green cube, and he would like to to acquire a scroll in the office, and he takes the easy way out of just paying a pink cube. The red player also wants to go crafting, so he takes a brown cube, and he would like to go to the mill, so he can give up the 2 grains he just harvested, take 2 coins, and lose 2 time. The blue player goes to the council chamber, takes a pink cube, and now he has basically 3 options. He could send in another family member at the first level. He could advance this family member to the 2nd level, or he could just let this family member stay where it is and take the reward of this step, so basically becoming next star player again. But he actually wants to advance, so that will cost him 2 time and either a scroll or 2 green cubes. So 2 time, and then he decides to use a scroll he just had built in the office, or had crafted in the office, and the advancement is complete. Now, at this stage, he could either take as a reward for the advancement any 2 cubes, or becoming the next starting player, and he would like to have any 2 cubes, and he actually takes a brown and a green one. The red player takes the family action, he takes the orange cube, and he gets a new family member. Now the blue player does something that I haven't shown to you before, that is, he goes to the well and takes action there, and basically what he can do here is hand in any 3 cubes of the same color to do any action, even if it doesn't have any cubes left. And what the blue player would like is to take a harvest action, but there's no longer any cubes. So what he can do, he can turn in 3 brown cubes, and then take a harvest action nevertheless, which will give him 4 grain. The red player would like to travel again, so first he takes a cube from here. That's a black cube, unfortunately, so that's 2 more time. And then he would like to travel east to that village. So that's another wagon and 2 time. A wagon. And 2 time, meaning somebody will die again. And 2 brown cubes and an orange cube. Well, and the reward to go there is 2 cubes of any color, and he would actually like to take 2 pink cubes. And finally, he can also mark this village. And now he has a choice to make. On his farmyard there's only 2nd generation family members. In the church as well, so there's a craftsman and there's a traveler. And he actually decides that the traveler should die, because there's only 1 green spot in the chronicle. The blue player takes the council chamber action again, and he would like to advance his family member a step further. That's 2 time and a scroll, or 2 green cubes, but this time, no, sorry, he paid a scroll last time, so now it's 2 green cubes. So 2 time and 2 green cubes. And the reward for this step is any good. He could also become the next starting player or take 2 cubes, but any good is good. And so he takes a scroll again to actually prepare for advancing the next time again. The red player would actually like another wagon, so he picks up a black cube, that's 2 time, and another wagon, that's another 2 time, so he loses 4 time altogether, but he gets a wagon. The blue player decides to go to the church, and he picks an orange cube. Decides to pay the cost for throwing a family member in the bag with time, which means that actually with 3 time somebody will die. And then he takes his remaining family member, and puts it into the cube. Sorry, into the bag, not cube. And yes, well, somebody has to die, and there's a choice between this family member in church and this family member in crafts over there. And he actually decides to pick the one in church. So there's 1 left in the brown section of the village chronicle. The red player decides to pick the cube from the family action and to get a 3rd generation family member. The blue player has not many choices left. Down at the church he could throw another family member in the bag, but the thing is he doesn't have any. So he actually decides to take the black cube from the traveling section, basically denying the red player to take that action later on. And for that he loses 2 time. The red player had actually planned to use the traveling action, but now he decides that he will use the 3 pink cubes he has gathered to actually do a well action as well, and to do a harvest. So he has lots of family members on the board, he has no animals or plows, so that means he just gets 2 grain. The blue player decides to take the brown cube, but not do the associated action, which he can't do anyway. And then finally the red player has to take the black cube, because he doesn't have any 3 influence cubes of the same color left, so he loses 2 time. And since he would like to perform the action but doesn't have any brown cubes left, that's another 3 time, but he gets to put a family member in the bag, and he decides to take one of the second generation. So it's time for reading the mass again, because it's the end of the round, and these are the contents of the bag. And first is the blue player, and he can decide whether he wants to buy somebody out, and he actually does. He only has 1 coin, so he pays it and decides he wants his second generation family member out of the bag. And then the red player also decides to pay a coin and take this member out. And then those are thrown back in the bag, and 2 are pulled randomly, because that'll make up 4 with the other 2. So we draw 1, we draw 2, the black one goes back, but all of these are put into the church. And then it's for the blue player to decide whether he wants to pay grain to move his members up in the hierarchy, and of course he wants to, because he has lots of grain. So first he pays 3 grain to advance this family member 1-2 spaces for 3, and then he actually pays a fourth 1 to have this family member go here. And then the red player decides to pay 2 grain to have both of his family members move up here. Okay, now both have the same amount of family members in the church, but the blue player is higher in the hierarchy, so he'll actually receive 2 points alone this turn. And at the end of the round, because nobody took this token, the blue player remains the starting player. The blue player decides to take the family action, so he decides to take a pink cube and bring in one of his new family members. The red player decides to take a pink cube from the church and put in one of his family members into the bag, and that'll cost him another 3 time, which means that somebody will die again. And now basically the red player doesn't have any choice, because this one is the only one he has left from the first generation, so this one has to die and go into the craftsman area. The blue player, now that he has a family member on his farmyard again, decides to go harvesting, so he takes a brown cube, and he gets his usual 4 grain for having an ox and a plow. The red player picks up a green cube from the crafting area and decides to put an apprentice into the stables. That costs him 3 time, and then another 3 time for raising an ox. So he loses 6 time. And gets an ox. The blue player needs money, so he decides to go to the crafting area and visit the windmill, or the mill, giving up 2 grain, getting 2 coins, and losing 2 time. The red player goes to the family space and receives his last 3rd generation family member. The blue player picks the city, the council chamber action, takes a green cube, advances his family member to the next space. That costs him 2 green cubes, 1 he just got. Here's the other one. Also 3 time. And the reward for that space is, although again he could take any one of the others, to pay a coin to get 3 victory points once. And he does that. So he pays a coin and he gets 1, 2, 3 victory points. The red player decides to take the family action again, so he gets one of the fourth generation. And the blue player simply decides to pick this action again. So basically he takes this cube, and then since his family member is already there, he can just take any of the privileges again, and he decides again to pay 1 coin to get 3 points. The red player decides to use a crafting action, and he puts one of his family members as an apprentice at the smith, because he would like to have a plow, so that will cost him 3 time for the apprenticeship and another 3 time to produce a plow, so that's 6. And again, a family member dies, but first he gets a plow. So all his first generation family members are gone, so he actually has to take one of his second generation, and the only ones that are available for that are actually in the church, so one of them has to die and fills up the last church position in the village chronicle. The blue player decides that he now should take a market action, because as of this moment he is able to fulfill this demand for 3 grain. So he pays a 3 grain, and this demand is flipped down. And now the red player, he could satisfy any of these, but he got the oxen particularly to harvest, so he doesn't want to sell to any of these customers. And so basically what happens is that the one with the wagon is put up here, and the others move up, and one is replaced. The red player takes the last harvest action, losing 2 time for the black cube, and then he gets 4 grain because now he also has an oxen and a plow. The blue player decides to take a black cube from the crafts, so he loses 2 time, and at the end of the turn somebody will die. And then he would actually like to produce another ox, or raise another ox, which will cost him 3 time. So another ox for him, and again 3 time are lost. And the blue player has 2 family members of the first generation left. One is down here in the church and the other is in the crafting area, so he decides to let that one die to fill up this spot. The red player decides to travel, losing 2 time in the process. And since he has nobody in the traveling section anymore, he can bring in a new family member, and he actually would like for that family member to travel east to this city over here. So that's 2 time, a wagon, and 2 pink cubes. 2 times paid easily, although one will die. The wagon also, and then there's 1 pink cube and a coin. And the red player will get another 3 points, and will be able to mark the space with a disc of his. And now somebody has to die, and this is a 2. And the others are 3s or 4s, so basically the one in the church has to die. And there are no spaces left in the chronicle for people from the church. Actually, there's only 1 space left now for a farmyard guy. So what happens is that this guy will go into an anonymous grave to be never heard of again. The blue player decides that it would be great to have another market day, so what he does is pay 3 orange cubes, so he can actually satisfy this customer who wants an ox that he can pay. And the red player can satisfy neither demand because both would require a wagon, and also the blue player doesn't have a wagon, so we're basically done with the market, and these move up, and this one down here is replaced. The red player goes to the crafting area, which means that he loses 2 time, and then he goes to the windmill, meaning that he gives up 2 grain to get 2 coins and lose another 2 time. Then the blue player would like to harvest again, so he also gives up 3 cubes, and he gets his usual 4 grain for having an ox and a plow. The red player decides to have another marriage action or family, by paying 3 green cubes. And one thing I didn't tell you is that instead of taking one of your available family members from the supply, you can also take back any of the family members on any spaces of the board. And what you would actually like to do is take back this family member and put him onto his yard again. A blue player decides to take a cube from the church action to actually throw this family member into the bag, and he does that by paying 3 times. The red player takes this cube but doesn't want to take the associated action, and then the blue player would like to have another market day by giving up the 3 brown cubes. And basically what he can do is satisfy that customer's demand by giving up his plow. And then the blue player doesn't have any wagons. The red player doesn't have any wagons, so he can't do anything. And the blue player also hasn't any wagons, so we're basically done again. Okay, then the red player decides to pay 2 brown cubes and a coin to build another plow, so that'll cost him another 3 times. Then the blue player doesn't basically have any choice. He doesn't have enough cubes to take a well action, so he can just take that one. And that'll cost him 2 times. Okay, normally we would go on for another round now because the endgame conditions are no longer are not yet triggered, but I'm afraid I'm running out of time in this video. So let's just pretend, please, that the last action of the red player actually put his time marker beyond the bridge, so another one of his family members would have to die. And well, we have a 3 here on the farmyard and a 3 over here on the crafting section, and that guy actually is a 4. So what we could do now is have this guy die and fill in the last spot in the chronicle for people who worked at the farm. And if you remember earlier, the red player, when he took the family action, actually had the choice of bringing in a new member of the 4th generation or take back one of the others. And here you can see that it was quite clever to take back the one and put it on his farmyard, because now this person could die and go into the village chronicle. If you would have taken that one and put him on the farmyard, then now one of the 3s would have had to die, because that's a 4. And by that we kind of brought on the endgame a little early. So from now on, let's please just pretend that this was a situation. The endgame was triggered, then the other player who didn't get the trigger the endgame, or actually all other players in a more than 2-player game, gets another action. But basically the blue player didn't have another option than to just take the black cube from there, because that was the last one anyway. Okay, so one final mass is held, and that final mass is held because it's the end of the game and not the end of the round. So basically, if there would have been more cubes and the end of the round wouldn't have been triggered yet, but the end of the game, a final mass would still take place. So these are the contents of the bag. And the blue player doesn't have any money, so he can't do anything, but the red player actually has some money, has a coin, so he pays it and takes out this one guy. Okay, so the red one is out of the bag, and then we pull 3 more. And the blue player is lucky because his family member got put out of the bag out as well. So we put them here, and then the blue player can start to pay grain to advance them further. And what he does is he pays 4 grain and actually advances this member 1 step further in the hierarchy. And then the red player can still pay 1 grain to also let his member advance 1 step. And then we see that the blue player has more family members in the church than the red player, so he gets another 2 points. Okay, then let's take a look at the scoring. First, let's take a look at the travel scoring, and only the red player has placed in disc there, but he has visited 4 cities, and 4 cities means 10 points. So he moves from 8 to 18. Next up is the council chamber, and here the blue player has advanced to the last position, which is worth 6 points. So the blue player advances from 12 to 18. Then next up is the church, and here each position has a certain amount of points. So the red player gets 3, and the blue player gets 2 and 3, that's 5, and 6, that's 11. So first 3 for the red player, 1, 2, 3, and then 11, so 29 for the blue player. Then next is a village chronicle, and here you can see that if you have 3 family members in there, that's what the blue player has, that's 4 points. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you have 4, that's 7, and if you have 5 or more, which is the case for the red player, that's 12 points. So he moves from 21 to 33, so they're once matched up again. They're once tied again. Then we have the customer tiles, and here the red player doesn't have anything, and the blue player has 2, and 3 is 5, and 3 is 8, and 3 is 11, and 4 is 15. Which brings me in at 48. And then no player has any coins left, but coins would have given another point. And we can see that the blue player won. Of course, we cheated a little bit here with the end game, but basically this rushing and having many people die to fill up the village chronicle didn't quite pay out for the red player, as we can see. Yeah, and that was almost a whole 2-player game of Village. Well, that was it. Almost a whole 2-player game of Village. I hope by doing this video I helped you understand the game, understand how it's played, and also hopefully you could decide whether this is something you're interested in. And yes, then I'll thank you for watching. If you have any comments, please contact me or leave a comment below the video on Board Game Geek. And see you next time. Bye.